Hey guys, it's Evan with Evan K Exotics, and this video is called Do Not Buy a Wild-Caught Boa Constrictor Unless... But to start off with, it's late April 2025, and the premise of this video is you're going to start seeing in the springtime quite a few imported Suriname and Guyana and maybe some other localities of boa constrictors hitting morph market. You're going to start seeing them expos and whatnot, and it's kind of an interesting thing, and I will tell you flatly that I'm not 100% against wild-caught animals. I think that they are necessary for the hobby. They were necessary for the establishment of every species. There is some need for them to perpetuate species in captivity, and I think that it's a reasonable thing to be importing animals and sending them to specific people. That being said, my overall opinion on wild-caught animals is that they are too prevalent and they are too cheap, and they too often end up in the hands of people that shouldn't have them. So that's just kind of flatly what I'll tell you. And the first thing I'm going to do is just tell you that this is Gregory. Gregory is a wild-caught Guyana boa constrictor. He is one of 2 wild-caught animals I have in my collection. I have had 4 wild-caught boa constrictors in my lifetime, and they all survived and they all did well. Gregory is wonderfully robust and seems to have acclimated. I got him as a very small baby. He's actually smaller than my newborn babies are when they come out. So I think he was very quickly shipped to America, and he established really well. And my big Guyana female, I believe she is farmed or imported. She's not captive bred. But the other 2 were healthy and fine, but they just never really quite established themselves quite the same as a captive bred animal. And just in general, I will tell you that for 99% of people, 100% of the time, captive bred animals are better. And for the other 1% of people, 90% of the time, captive bred animals are better. So very few people should be getting wild caught animals, and even the people that are getting them, most of the time they should be getting captive bred animals. And as somebody that's sitting here with a wild caught animal, I'm going to say that just flatly, it might seem egotistical to say this, but the truth of the matter is that a captive bred animal is going to be more well acclimated, generally healthier, generally more tractable, and will generally give you a better experience overall. So the only motivation in my mind for having a wild-caught animal is to bring new genetics into a group. And that's something that people like who are breeding true red-tailed boas do need to think about. And you can bring new genetics from getting captive bred animals from other places, but also the most novel genetics are going to be from a wild-caught animal. And that's just because even within these not heavily lineaged true red-tailed boas, they do have a lot of lines in them. So I would say that for any species, and also true for true red-tailed boas, a limited number of them should be going to people, and the only people that should be getting them are people that are experienced with the species to a high degree. Sometimes I see people get, like recently I saw some woman post that she's like, I'm experienced with boas, I have half a decade of experience, and I have this imported boa, but then she asked, what do I do when it regurgitates? So you have to have a level of experience, and it just doesn't mean that you're patting your own ego. If you have to ask what happens the first time your imported true red-tailed boa regurgitates or has a watery poo, you didn't have enough experience beginning that. The same thing goes, they should be going to people who have experience breeding them or have a decent chance of breeding them. And that just goes back to the premise that the only reason to have one of these animals is because you want to bring in new genetics. And so if you don't have the experience to breed snakes and have a proven track record of breeding snakes, I think it's a little cynical for you to say, well, really what I need is new blood first thing off, so to start my breeding projects. I think that you have to prove that you can reproduce the species before you have a pretty strong argument for needing a wild-caught animal. I guess I will just tell you that. And the other 2 factors are factors that, even if you are experienced like me, they're hard to come by. And the first one is you have to be willing to and able to fully quarantine this animal for 6-9 months, okay? Because these animals lived outside of my reptile room for a better part of a year, because I don't want to risk my collection of animals. You have to think that this animal was taken from the wild, and it was conglomerated with many other wild-caught animals, and from all over different parts of the world, so different diseases in different areas to make snakes susceptible. And so it was exposed to that pathogen stew, and then it was shipped to you. And what you don't want to do is pass it on to your collection. So you have to have a quarantine setup and be willing and able to manage the risks. And the last thing is you have to be willing to accept a bad outcome. And I mean that both from the loss of your animal and your investment and your money and your time, but also like you have to understand that when you buy a wild caught animal, you are responsible for it being plucked from the environment, boxed up, shipped internationally, and landing on your door. And if it dies in that process, that's kind of on you. And that's an unseemly part of the hobby that still exists. There is some necessity for it, but there's also not a lot of necessity. And there's way more of these wild caught animals coming in that need to be coming in. So I will just tell you that those are the 4 conditions under which you should be appropriately getting an animal, is that you have experience with the species and with the reproduction, that you are able to house it and quarantine it away from your collection, and that you have the you have the ability to take a loss if you need to, I guess is what I should say. So flatly, that's just what I tell you. Wild caught animals are more fragile, more susceptible to diseases, all the common problems. The reason that people don't think true red tails are commonly regurged is because there's a lot more captive bred ones going on. We are really eating from a silver spoon in terms of captive bred animals right now. So, but the wild caught animals are just more fragile. They take a year plus before they feel really established. And it's just the truth of the matter. So that all being said, I want to put out some of the reasons why people might get wild caught animals that I think are not the best motivations. And one of the first reasons why I think that people get these animals is because they are struck by the beauty of one. And so they see one on Morph Market, or they see one at an expo table, and it sets their heart aflutter. And that is fair. And if it's a wild caught animal, it can be dead gorgeous. And as somebody that likes boas, I understand that motivation. But here's what I will tell you. The thing that makes a boa the most beautiful is pristine health. A captive bred animal that is in pristine health is going to be more beautiful than an imported animal that hasn't been established. Most of these imports, when I look at them, they can be pretty animals and I can see the potential in the animals, but I can also see that they're a little roughshod. And if you're somebody that cannot see those extra factors beyond the color, beyond the pattern, beyond the excitement of seeing it on the table, if you can't look at it and be like, it looks a little dry, it looks a little dehydrated, it looks a little thin, it looks a little dull, it looks a little tacky, any of those things. If you can't be seeing those things in a wild-caught animal, because most wild-caught animals have those features when you first get them, then I would say you're probably not the person to be getting one, just because you don't have the experience to recognize those factors of health. Another reason why I've heard people say that they want to get wild-caught true red-tailed boas is actually the same woman that's like, I have half a decade of experience. She said she wants to experience a wild animal, the wild behaviors of an animal. And that's just not what you're going to have with the wild-caught animal, in the sense that when I think, what are the wild experiences I want to see from the snake? I want to see it on a branch in a dripping rainforest. I want to see it slowly, deliberately stalking a prey. I want it to be atavistic. I want it to be primal. I want it to be bold. I want it to be I want it to be strong. I want it to be healthy. I want it to be fecund. That's what it means to be wild and atavistic and primal. And those are really great goals to have with your animal, because I think at the end of the day, that's a really pretty profound thing to do. But I will tell you that you're not going to get that out of a stressed out, sick, imported animal. And the little thought experiment I would have for you is, if we took a baby elephant and you said, I want to see a baby elephant's full, wild, natural behavior. If we snatched a baby elephant, put it in a crate and shipped it to America, and then put it in a little stable or a pen, like a horse pen, do you think we're going to see that elephant's natural wild behavior more so than you would see at a familial group of elephants that is living in a captive setting on a reserve that's well acclimated and stress-free? Which ones do you think is going to be displaying more of those true, natural, animal and full behaviors? That stressed out, sick, imported elephant, or that one that was kept under ideal captive conditions? I would argue to you that the one kept under ideal captive conditions from birth is going to be displaying a more full repertoire of those wild behaviors. So that's just something I will tell you, and it's the same with the snake. I think that if your motivation is to see a big, robust, bold, atavistic boa constrictor raise up a pristine captive bred true red-tailed boa for 5, 6, 7 years in a beautiful setup, and you are going to see that wild behavior. You're not going to see that from your sick, dehydrated, stressed out animal, imported animal. Okay, you're just not going to see it. So I want it to be wild. It's kind of like the same thing with when people say, I feed my snake live because it's natural. And I think that's a total load of hooey. Because why is it the only natural thing you're doing is feeding it a live animal? You take the animal out of its wild, put it in a box, give it electric heat, and put it on paper with a metal water bowl. And the only natural thing that matters to you is the fact that it is natural to feed it live. I just don't get that reasoning. It's in the same way. I'm like, why is it that the only thing that's natural or wild about that motivation, the only thing you do is get that wild caught animal. You're putting it in a rack, you're putting it on paper, you're putting it in a tote, you're putting it in a relatively small cage. Why not get a pristine captive bred animal and raise it in a huge bioactive setup? That's how you'll see wild behaviors, okay? That's another thing that I think is a little cynical. Number 3 is that they're cheaper. You can buy a wild caught one of these for like less than $300, and I think that they're going to be a couple $100 cheaper than a captive bred one. And the truth of the matter is, yeah, that's true. But you have to understand that you're getting a better animal and a better process when you buy captive bred. It's not like somebody's buying a ribeye steak over here and then somebody's selling it for 60% of the price over there. It's like somebody's selling a ribeye over here and somebody's selling a cheap chuck patty over here. So you have to understand that a wild caught animal is empirically a different product, and so that should matter to you. You're getting a healthier, more robust animal when you get captive bred. And it's also a better process. You take out the unseemly factors of taking an animal out of the wild, importing it, all that stress, all that animal attrition and death that happens in the export process. And you're replacing it with essentially purchasing your snake from the equivalent of farmer's market. You're going to purchase it from somebody like me. I don't care if you purchase it from me, purchase it from somebody like me. And it's basically like the person that grew those tomatoes in their backyard and brought them to market. That's what's happening. So you're getting a better product and process with a captive bred animal. And I think what I would tell you is that the price of a wild caught animal plus your first trip to the vet with it is going to be more than the price of a captive bred animal. So yeah, it's a little cheaper up front, but you have to understand what good value is. And the last thing is, I think some people think that they can get a more mature animal, wild caught animal, as a head start to breeding because maybe they don't want to wait 5 years to raise up a baby. And, people do bring in adult animals, and I know some people that do, and I don't know how easily or well they breed. But here's just some things I will tell you. It's like, even if you got a subadult or an adult true red-tailed boa in, it's going to be harder to acclimate than a baby, so you have to take the time to acclimate it. Another factor is that you're going to have to convert its seasons, because in South America, their summers and our winters. So that's the reason babies come in our spring, is because it's their fall. So it's not because we get babies in the spring, just like spring chickens here. It's because their season is in the fall right now, and so they're shipping them up because boas are born in the fall. So if you got an adult boa, you would actually have to convert its season over a number of years to match the North American cycle. So I just don't know that you'd save a ton of time, but by getting a subadult or an adult Guyana, rehabilitating it, making it healthy, and then breeding it over just getting a baby and then raising it up for 4 or 5 years. I just don't know that would save it for you. But those are the reasons why I'll tell you that a very limited number of people should be getting these wild caught animals, and I'm just rambling about it at this point. But I hope all that makes sense to you. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Take care. Bye-bye.